Gentlemen, a series of conversation between men for men to talk about taboo subjects like emotion, behavior, culture, and mental health, just to name a few, in hopes to encourage men to embrace their authentic self and reclaim their emotional being. So join me to bring back the gentle in men. We're here at the Gentleman Show, which is dedicated for men to embrace their authenticity and understand that there is an emotional side to every being that they need to be a part of, and they will get to the balance within themselves by tapping into their masculinity and feminine side of them, and with it they'll reach their harmony. The show is dedicated for men, where we have gentlemen like Fahad, who's my guest today, and this is the idea behind tapping into subjects, topics, and conversations that is meant to be spoken about. And I would love to introduce my guest today, Fahad Sarwani, who is a dear friend before everything and a spiritual teacher. And I'll let him introduce himself. And I would like to start with by thanking you being here in the chapter 2 of Gentlemen.
Thank you, Hamad, for having me. It's really a pleasure to be a part of this initiative. I think it's a wonderful initiative. So my name is Fahad Sarwani. Like you said, I'm just turned 40, father of 4 kids. Alhamdulillah, I have 3 beautiful daughters and a son. I've, just a little bit about my background. We come from like Pakistani roots. So my grandfather moved to Bahrain many, many years ago. He set up what was the toy store of the time,
Nice.
novelty stores. I don't know if you were around for that or not, but the older generation would know what I'm talking about. It was the toy store and the gift shop of the region, basically, right? Like the Toys R Us of the region of that time, yeah?
Like I remember one was called Ajib. I think that's one in Manama. We grew up knowing
exactly,
that.
yeah. So yeah, we were, born Bahrainis. Alhamdulillah, I've been here my entire life. Went to IKNS, private schooling, and then went on to study in the US, graduated from New York City.
MashaAllah.
Did my MBA. Then things turned around and I did a 4-year Sharia degree.
Nice.
So yeah,
Here in
alhamdulillah.
Bahrain,
Yeah,
or-
here in Bahrain.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
So and now I'm a banker. I work for a bank here in Bahrain, and as a part-time passion, I am also a certified life coach
Nice.
/ spiritual teacher, specifically with the Quran. I've been obsessed with the Quran as a holy text, and I've been researching that for the past 15 years. So my interest in self-development, spirituality, healing, and self-development is what kind of is where I'm at right now.
That's beautiful,
Yeah.
man. Since you told me, like, you come from some sort of a culture, tradition, and then you kind of got into a different environment, which is, let's say, the private schooling. Like, I just want to make sure that I don't want to be biased to anything or criticize anything. But at the end of the day, let's say you have a certain mentality where your parents been raised, and coming here, was there any difference in that? And with it, the way they raised you up, going to another school, let's say private school, at that point before you go to the States, because each and every phase of that, I'm sure it impacts you as a person differently. Could you touch upon that, please?
Yeah, so you definitely have like this identity crisis, right? At some stage back in school, I remember the stigma of, I'm not a pure Bahraini, and the fact that, how people look down upon like Asians and Indians and Pakistanis, and unfortunately that racism is there in society, in this part of the world at least, yani. Although some people don't like to hear this, but that's the sad and reality
How
out there.
were you able to cope with that?
So I think that made me get the courage to be who I am, like,
Okay.
and instead of hiding away. And this is something that we're trying to instill in our children, me and my wife today, right? Is
Inshallah.
the fact that, listen, you have Pakistani roots, you need to accept that and be proud of it, and there's nothing to be ashamed of. That doesn't make you less of a person. And I think I was blessed with friends who appreciated that, and they basically accepted that and supported me along the way. I didn't feel left out. I didn't feel like I need to change the way I am, the way I speak. They all knew my parents. They would come over and have biryani with us at home, and the spicy food. And my friends loved, like, there's a specific dessert that my mom makes with guava, and like really spicy guava with bananas. And my friends still today, some of them, right? They can't forget that. I mean, really good stuff. Yeah. So I think it also gave them, my friends, an opportunity to be exposed to a different kind of culture also, right?
Nice.
And for them, this was interesting. But yeah, it's a challenge. And we're working on that with our children right now.
Hello. Is your wife Pakistani?
Yeah,
as well?
she's also my first cousin.
Okay.
But I brought her from Pakistan, so
Okay.
she used to live in Lahore. And I thought that for me, culture was something that I value a lot. And I felt by marrying my cousin, this would bridge the culture, like, and my family back home, right? Because with time, we tend to kind of disconnect and distance each other, right? And so this really strengthened the ties between me and my, cousins and families. And we of course, pre-corona, we used to go back and forth a lot. And so I think it's wonderful to bridge that, and it just makes you more diverse and exposed to different cultures. And I think when one can cope with that and be their true self, not being ashamed of your name or your background or your nationality or your tongue. I mean, sometimes they have these questionnaires where they ask you, what's your mother tongue? I actually don't know what my mother tongue is, because it's not English, it's not Arabic, and it's not Urdu, right? But I speak all three fluently. Alhamdulillah, I can read all three. Alhamdulillah. The only thing is I can't write Urdu, but I can read Urdu at least. Yani.
I'm sure you write Arabic.
Yeah, of course. Arabic and English, fluent, alhamdulillah. But yeah, I mean, I can watch Bollywood movies and like without translation and subtitles, so that's good.
We come down to we're all sons of Adam.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. We're all one.
Yeah.
And I totally believe that. So we get to the point where I wanted to ask one more question. Were you always been here? Like, you're born and raised in Bahrain?
So I was, since I told you the family business was GCC wide.
Yeah.
So my father's brothers were stationed in different countries, from UAE to Qatar to Bahrain and others. So my dad was stationed in Abu Dhabi when I was born. So I was actually born in Abu Dhabi.
Okay.
Stayed there for 6 years, went to nursery there, and then moved to Bahrain in 1980. So for 6 years I was in Abu Dhabi, but I was born with a Bahraini nationality.
Okay.
But I don't remember like much from those 6 years. Yeah. So I consider Bahrain home.
Alhamdulillah. So we got to know where you come from. You've been here. Let's say some sort of a challenge until you've created your circle. I kind of hate that you mentioned that the racism was always there, but at the end of the day, there's no denial, But alhamdulillah, you overcome that because you showed truly who Fahad is. And I believe that as long as you don't wear the mask, people tend to see through it, and that's the beauty of seeing people soul to soul. That's where the bond kind of builds. So we understood that Fahad, we know who Fahad was until the point that he actually decided on going to continue his education in the States. Tell us more about that. Like, who was Fahad before he goes, and what kind of, let's say, perspective changed when you were there?
Right. So since school days, I would say one of my core values would have been excellence, right? I mean, I wouldn't study too hard, but still like get good grades, alhamdulillah. I tried to be a good son to my parents.
Alhamdulillah.
Tried to be a good brother. I have three sisters. Alhamdulillah, I'm the only son. So there was a sense of being also responsible from a young age, you know. But just an example of excellence, right? Is I took on tennis as at the age of 8.
Mhm.
And alhamdulillah, you know, have represented Bahrain in the national team.
MashaAllah. I didn't know
We
that.
played Davis Cup. Yeah, so by 2001, I was actually ranked number 1 in Bahrain. I won the
Mashallah.
Bahrain Open. So
This man is full of
this was
prizes.
yeah. So this was cool. You know, it kept me fit and out of trouble. You know, because when you're, it was basically school, come back home, do lunch, and then go play tennis,
Yeah.
come back, have dinner, and sleep. So I didn't have time to get in trouble,
Mischief.
basically. Yeah. That came, you know, at college, basically. But yeah, so I enjoyed the travel. I enjoyed, because you know, being on the national team, you get to travel, you get to play
Yes.
tournaments during schooling season, like during
Yeah.
the semesters. So
How old were you at that point?
I started when I was 8,
Okay.
all the way up till you know, when I was 20. Technically, you know, I was playing competitive tennis.
Nice.
That I was even blessed to be. I actually got rewarded a tennis and athletic scholarship
MashaAllah.
to go and play in the United States. So
That's
yeah,
amazing.
and it was a full scholarship. Like, so my
MashaAllah.
parents were really proud of that.
MashaAllah. But this has nothing to do with the going and studying in the States?
Yeah,
or?
it is, because that
Okay,
was the
okay.
trigger, right?
Nice, nice.
So
If you don't mind,
yeah,
before we
sure,
actually
sure.
tap in, like I love the doorway of the idea of understanding or being open to different cultures. So
Sure.
you said you traveled a lot.
Yeah.
So just tap into that, man. And
Mm.
I love how you develop a new idea, a new perspective every time you kind of get to know more about different cultures. Could you just tap into that a little bit?
Yeah, so what was interesting about the tennis scene back then, it was located in Isa Town.
Okay.
In an I don't know if you remember the old stadium,
Yeah,
right?
definitely.
Which is now actually a parking lot, right? Unfortunately, right? But back then, you know, tennis was funded well. You know, His Majesty the King would be playing tennis, and so it was a popular sport. It was a posh sport. My dad himself used to play badminton, but he wanted me into another racket sport, so I tried out tennis. And what was interesting about that, the demographics of that area, like Isa Town, was that most of the players that would come and play would be the mischief kind of boys on the streets of Isa Town,
Okay.
right? Shabab al Medina, as they call them, right? And so it was really interesting for me, coming from like a private schooling background, to play and associate and make friends with people who were literally Shabab al Medina, you know? So I got exposed to that aspect of society, which was wonderful, because first of all, it makes you humble also. The fact that, you know, there are people who are living in, you know, let's say very conservative kind of means, who for them, this sport was an opportunity to make a career of themselves. This was an opportunity for them to earn a living. You know, when we traveled, they'd give us like pocket money. And like when you're a kid and you get like 100 dinar pocket money,
Allowances
like
and stuff
allowance
like
and
that,
stuff,
yeah,
or
yeah.
you get sponsorship from Head or from like Nike or Reebok. That's like, it's
big,
cool.
man.
It makes you feel, you know, really good about it. So
Yeah.
that was really, really interesting. The fact that, first of all, making friends and playing together with that segment of society, right? Which today we're still in touch. I mean, you know, we play together and we're like brothers. So that was very humbling for me, I think, because sometimes, you know, when you're in a specific part of society, you kind of neglect and are disconnected from that other segment of society, right? And I don't want to say lower class, but I'm just saying that kind of segment of society, right? The underprivileged. So for them, it was a means of earning an income, a career, a sense of recognition, a sense of accomplishment. And we played together, and, you know, we traveled. I mean, funds weren't that kind of, they were limited in terms of like funding needs. So we traveled the Arab world.
Okay.
Yes, we went to Thailand. We went like, I think that's as far out we went, but we did play in the Davis Cup. I played in the Asian Games. So yeah, we didn't make it to the Olympics, but alhamdulillah, it was a beautiful experience being exposed to a different segment of society, first of all, and representing a country together, right? Regardless of your sect or your background or your nationality, right? We were all representing one flag, one nation. And And even when it came to like playing and competing with other countries of the GCC and the Arab world, yes, we'd compete, but then we'd be friends with them, you know. So a lot of them are still friends of mine, you know.
I love that's about sportsmanship.
Absolutely, yeah. So it teaches you teamwork. I think that I learned teamwork from a young age. Got exposed to different Arabic kind of cultures, whether it's Egypt or Algeria or Tunis or even like Akhwanna fil Khalij, you know, the GCC, our brothers. So yeah, I think that was a wonderful kind of addition to my experiences.
Nice. Yeah. Let's go to the States right now.
Yeah. So I got my scholarship, full scholarship, to play in a private school in Division 2. You know, in the US, you have Division 1, which is like all the pros, and then you have Division 2 and Division 3. So I went in Division 2 as the number 1 player there. Full scholarship, private school, private college, Lynn University in Boca Raton, Florida, which is one of the poshest cities in Florida. 45 minutes away from Miami, so that was not bad, right?
There's another side for Fahad.
Right. And yeah, but unfortunately, because I was number 1, I had to play with other number 1s of other teams on the weekends, and sometimes it would be home or away, and I lost every single match.
Okay.
Because being number 1 in Bahrain, like maybe it sounded nice on a CV, but when you play against number 1 of other colleges, right? I mean, it was like 15-year-olds, 16-year-olds would like be beating me easy, and the coach was obviously very upset, and he didn't renew my contract. So I had to either come back to Bahrain or transfer to another college, and that's where I transferred to New York City.
And why is that, if you don't mind me asking? Like, just tell me, so you were good here.
Yeah.
Is it because the kind of challenge you had to face here that put like, I don't want to say there wasn't a lot of good players, but I just want to make sure, like, why is that was difficult for you to actually compete with these and get the same kind of skill set that you have here against them? You could use it.
Yes, I think it's the main reason is lack of exposure to that level of players, right?
Okay,
so we were exposed to the Arab region players, right? Which is great, but it's still limited, right? When you all of a sudden go and play against a European player or someone from North America or Canada or wherever, or Australia, like it's a completely different league, a different level, right? Okay. So in terms of match experience, in terms of physical strength, in terms of body build, like they were like giants compared to me, you know. I don't know what they eat there, but it was completely like a different ball game, right? Where yes, if we would hit together, like practice casually, like hit a ball, yeah, I can play for an hour with them, right? At that speed. Yeah. But when it comes to a match, it's a completely different. So I think lack of match experience and exposure to that level, and even height, like nutrition, body strength.
I would say like they were invested in
exactly
more than
and
maybe
those countries, they invest in sports much more than here.
Okay.
But it was an eye-opener because I used to think of tennis as a career and education would be like a side thing. But then going there and losing my contract made me realize, wait a second, I need to shift back to education.
Okay.
Tennis can be a hobby now. And so I did get another opportunity to play Division 3 this time. In New York City.
So this makes you, that's kind of made you let's say face people like on your level at that point.
Yeah, and Division 3 in New York City, I won pretty much every single match. So I was most valuable player of the season also.
If you don't mind me, this might be a little bit personal. Sure. How did it affect you on a personal level? Coming before you get there, you were ranked as number 1. I mean, I'm sure that fed into your ego a lot. Yeah. And going there in Division 2, how did that affect you?
Actually, I found it a bit disappointing, obviously, right? Yeah. I didn't expect it to be that much of a gap.
Okay.
It was an eye-opener, but I did feel that it was an opportunity for me to improve my game. Okay. Being in a team with other players who were higher than me in terms of levels, I think it was a good humble check also, right? Yeah. Sometimes, subhanAllah, these things fall into place for you to learn a lesson that, and you know your place. So I think I handled it pretty well. I didn't give up. I wasn't like, oh my God, I'm going back to Bahrain and it's over, right? no, I continued like applying for other colleges, and I actually got several opportunities,
Nice.
but decided
Nice.
to choose New York City because of New York City, right? So
You
yeah.
mentioned the mindset. Could you just tell us what kind of helped Fahad at that point have that kind of a mindset? Because I know for a fact, if let's say if I was in your place, I'm not gonna lie, I might be very disappointed, maybe broken as well, because I know for a fact that my younger me was not that developed mentally. So what helped you? I mean, could you just relive that moment and tell us who
Yes.
Fahad was back then?
Sure. So I think just kind of besides my core value of excellence, I think
Yeah.
another aspect of that would be never giving up, right?
Okay.
I took this from my father,
Okay.
Allah
Okay.
rahmah. He passed
Allah
away about
yarhamah.
15 years ago. But, you know, seeing them also, and this is taking you guys back to school, right?
Yeah.
So, like I told you, the business of the family was doing really well. It was at its peak in terms of GCCY, but then it came to a fall.
Okay.
So I saw really tough times financially during my school years. Even moments where or times where like we couldn't pay the school fees, and my father going to debt and that kind of stuff. So I saw financial struggle, like eye to eye, right?
Yeah.
And I saw my father in the lowest moments of his financial life, right? Never giving up, and willing to kind of do whatever it takes to stand up on his feet and get back together. So I think those values were instilled in me, and I carried them with me throughout that experience of, like, for example, losing my contract. And so this attitude of never giving up has always been with me in tennis, like even in terms of a match, right? I wouldn't give up until the last point is over. But at the same time, in general, it made me kind of more resilient to shocks or moments in life where like you are defeated simply, and you just basically get back on your feet and do whatever else you can.
That's beautiful, man. So you went to New York right then, and how was it?
Yeah, so New York, wonderful city. I mean, beautiful experience. Our college was, it's a business college called Baruch College in Midtown. Wonderful experience. And I think what I liked about New York was the multicultural aspect of the city, right? And, one of the things that my parents instilled in me at a very young age was prayer, right? I mean, you can go to the club, but at least pray Isha and then go to the club, right? So, and even in the morning, I remember, like, before school, you wash up, whatever, brush your teeth and everything, and then pray, and then have breakfast, and then go to school. It was like built into our routine, alhamdulillah. And, I give credit to my parents, especially my mother, for that. So, one of the first things I did was, when I went to New York, was find the MSA, which is known as the Muslim Student Association. It's a small room where you basically pray, right? So you go in and pray. And I thought it was just going to be prayer and then I'm out to my next class. But then when I started getting introduced to some of these, like, we had Chinese Muslims there. We had Muslims from Australia. We had Muslims from Japan, Muslims from Pakistan and India and Palestine and Algeria. And it was just incredible to kind of be exposed to other Muslims. And we all came together, different backgrounds, and we came to pray. And then guess what? Beyond that, we would talk about Islam. We would talk about Quran and like the Prophet ﷺ, and we would also kind of attend events. I mean, they would, like, during breaks and stuff between classes. What's really nice about colleges there, they actually fund these clubs with a budget to do activities and stuff. So they would have a pizza party and they would invite a speaker to come and talk about Islam, right? Nice. In like an American accent, which for me was new, because like Bahrain, we would attend khutbah with my, blessed father. I would attend Jum'ah khutbah, Friday prayers. But I would walk in and it was, there's an accounting term called last in, first out, LIFO, right? So we would be the last people in and first people out, right? So that's the best way to kind of get your Jum'ah and then out, right? Because there was a disconnect, with all due respect to, our khutbah and our preachers, but just the language barrier, being, also the education background, my advantage of English over Arabic and stuff. So being exposed to that was eye-opening, and this was a big slap in my face because if you recall, excellence has always been a value in my life, right? And here there was a new area of life which I was pretty much failing in. I had no idea what was Islam. I had no idea like why I was praying. I was praying, but why was I praying? What's the purpose of prayer? I had no idea about the stories of the prophets, no idea about what Surah Al-Fatiha means. I memorized a couple of short surahs, but what do they mean? What are the deeper realities of these? And so that for me, it was a nice slap in the face, I would say, because it gave me that energy that I don't know where, of course it came from God, right? But this hunger and thirst to want to learn this and be able to kind of excel in this also, right? This was one area where I was failing, and it was probably the most important area that was being neglected all this life, right? So my plans were to go to New York to continue partying, but subhanAllah, being exposed to these people, right, it was a detour of plans. And so
How old were you?
I was
old were
to
you
20,
when then?
20.
20. And you didn't have that kind of organizations or, let's say, groups in the first university?
No,
Okay.
I
I think
it
because
wasn't
New York
there.
is much more
Exactly.
culturally open.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
we had a couple of Arab friends, and we would go to Friday prayers and stuff, but it was just limited to that.
Yeah,
And then
yeah.
we'd go to Miami on the weekends, you know. But for me, New York was different. New York, I don't know if you've heard of Nu'man Ali Khan, right? Yeah, very famous preacher on YouTube. So he studied in the same college, and you know, we basically would eat samosas together and talk about Quran and.
I think you even got him to Bahrain.
Yeah,
once,
so he's
right?
been my guest many times in Bahrain,
I just-
and
Yeah, we'll tap into that, man.
Exactly,
He's
yeah.
a very important person to me as well.
but I remember one of the key figures there was an imam named Imam Siraj al-Wahhaj, right? African American. Like think of like Tupac or Dr. Dre with like a long beard and a cap, right? And he would give his khutbah. I mean, extremely powerful speaker. People like you know Malcolm X
Yeah,
and Martin
yeah.
Luther King. That kind of speaker, right?
When he speaks, you get goosebumps.
Exactly. Yeah, it just penetrates through your heart. And
Nice.
I would listen to his tapes earlier on before going to America, right? But
Nothing.
I knew that he was giving khutbah. It was a long ride away. I mean, I had to travel for at least an hour and a half by
Yeah.
train to make it in time for his khutbah and sit in the front row. And it was just unbelievable. I mean, to listen to, because you know, I have memorized all these rap songs, right? Dr. Dre, Tupac, and Snoop
Yeah.
Dogg, you know. And so for me to listen to Islam and Quran and Sunnah being talked in that accent was like I was finally getting it. It finally made sense, and I was just completely hooked to this thing, right? And yeah, I mean, I started my journey of memorizing Quran, studying, reading, which I hated, right? Like, I mean, back in school, I hated reading.
Yeah.
I remember like part of the English curriculum back in school was that you read for 15 minutes, right? Every single year. It's supposed to be a different book every semester. But I would play a trick on the teachers, and I would like, it was always the same book. Because like the teachers would change, right? So how would they know that this is a new book? I still remember the book was Matilda by Roald Dahl, right? It
Okay.
was the same book for every. So I've literally memorized that book. But then, so this like, so my love for reading like was a new spark, right? And of course, back then we didn't have internet as much, right? There was internet, but it wasn't like a source of knowledge. But yeah, so reading, and just taking in as much as I can was
That's
yeah.
beautiful, man. I want to emphasize on something that's really important. Most of us in the Arab culture are born Muslims and not by choice. And similar to you, I was a born Muslim. I had to practice all the rituals of Islam because I didn't know why I had to do it, and because my parents were doing it, and sometimes they whip my ass if I don't do it. So I would do it because I was forced to. It took me a long time until I got to the point where I understood why I do it. And this is something that you emphasized beautifully on, is because My advantage, again, in English. I've been studying English my whole life. I was trying to avoid Arabic. I chose French as a second language over Arabic. So I kind of, let's say, my whole teenage years, I didn't even study Arabic. Going through school, I tried to avoid as much as I could, and that's why I wasn't very interested in the Arabic language. Every time I tried to read Quran or I tried to understand it, I wasn't able to understand. My mind analyzes things in English way better and processes things way better in English. So that's only when I tapped into Mufti Monk, Nu'man, and I started. It opened my mind into something that, as you mentioned, like we were able to feel lyrics. And this was the same exact thing when I was being able to understand words of Quran from these preachers, and it made sense. That is when I was like, you know what? This is all part of what I believe, and it started aligning with my values, and it made me more closer and closer. And I know it took me a long time to get to that, but the minute I did tap into it, it opened a huge door of possibilities, and with it I walked into the choice of being a Muslim. I loved like how you put it, and the idea of like it got you to understand it, and I'm sure a lot of people could relate to it, because we tend to memorize lyrics hearing it once or twice, but when it comes to our religion, it's really hard to do that. I'm sure it's because a lot of people don't understand it. So,
Absolutely.
like, I'm really thankful you mentioned that, because this relates to my personal story. Just walk us through right after that. Like, this is the phase where you tapped into the spiritual side of you. So we understood that you went there for studying, but it opened like the door of possibility of getting into the spiritual side. What happened next, after you finished and moved here?
Yeah, so just to kind of take a few steps back, one of the weekends in Miami, I remember I was with a couple of friends from the Gulf, and we were in one of these clubs, right, that stays open till like 10 in the morning. You know, one of the and this club had like different rooms. So you had like the R&B room, the reggae room, and like the Arabic kind of room, you know. So in one of the techno rooms, I think it was, there was this music being played, really good music. But then all of a sudden, we hear in the music like the adhan. So the artist had like used the adhan as a form of like music in the midst of a techno song, right? And I still remember that moment. We were in the club, there's all these lights, people dancing, and, you know, all sorts of stuff happening. I was in my senses, alhamdulillah, you know. But I remember looking at the eyes of my other Bahraini friend, right? And we were both like, OMG, you know, what's going on? Where are we? What are we doing? You know? And so I remember that for me was a wake-up call. Like, what are you doing with your life? Where are you heading? You know, what is your direction? And so I think going to New York was Allah's answer of that question, right? It gave me clarity. It gave me a sense of purpose. It gave me a sense of direction, that this is where I want to go, right? But before that, it was blank, right? Yes, I mean, you get your good grades, hoping to get a good job, getting married, getting a house, getting the car, right? All of that. But then what next, right? And so I think in New York City, I found a sense of purpose. Being with these beautiful Muslims from all over the world, right? We came together with this idea of brotherhood, which I had friends back in school, right? But we were not, I didn't feel the brotherhood, right?
The bond between you
Like
guys.
I remember, I still remember in Ramadan, like I was the treasurer of the club. And we would hold these events, like pizza and stuff. And then after the event's over, we'd have pizza, right? Like for iftar and stuff. I remember being a volunteer, right? Like the volunteers, we would distribute pizza to the guests, but we would never have pizza ourselves. And then like the guests would finish all the pizza and we'd be left with like no pizza, and we'd still have a smile on our face, and we'd still fight with each other on cleaning up the room. You know, this for me was an eye opener. I mean, this experience was, I had never had it before, right? And so I really cherished like that brotherhood, right? And we would call each other brother Fahad, brother Hamad, sister Fatima, sister Maryam.
Yeah.
That respect was just phenomenal, you know. And then all of a sudden, of course, 9/11 happens, and I'm there, and we're like a few blocks away from like downtown, and you know, there was a lot of fear, there was a lot of confusion. At the same time, this was an opportunity for us to stand up and put up stalls and give out pamphlets about the fact that this is not Islam. We have nothing to do with this, and you know, people would come and like there was more interest about this. And so that preacher side of me, that's where it started, right? It's the idea that, okay, I need to stand up for who I am. I need to defend Islam, not allow any terrorist attack or any crazy idea out there to hijack Islam, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that
feels like it was preparing for this moment.
Exactly, yeah. So, but to be able to preach, I'd have to be equipped and to have that knowledge. And so they say in Arabic, فاقد الشيء لا يعطي, right? So the one who lacks cannot give. And so, of course, I was limited because I was a beginner back then, right? But then this also gave me this
opportunity,
like turbo boost to even take in more, right? And to catch up, because time is short, and I wanted to come back and get married quickly. And I don't want to get married without having this knowledge, right? And so for me, that was all part of like the motivation of taking in as much as I can, sleeping less, reading more books, you know, attending more lectures, listening to more tapes and talks. And and then, you know, it continued even after college, like when after 9/11, of course, my parents want me back home, right? And they're seeing this weird transformation happening in their son, which was another challenge, right? And this fear in my parents that, is Fahad also turning into another terrorist, right?
Oh my God.
So I had to come back and face face that aspect of things. Guys, I'm still normal, right? I'm still cool, right? Yes, I've changed a lot, right? But I accept you. I remember one of my like really wise teachers gave me advice before coming back to Bahrain. He said, shut up for 2 years.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And this was like advice like that you can really write in gold, because one of the first thing that people do when they go through a transformation is they become preachers, they become judgmental, right? And so for me to like shut up literally, right? And just observe and accept others, whoever they are, right? And not to like enforce any of my beliefs on anybody, right? So I think this from a early stage was a blessing, right? This advice.
I love that one.
To hold on, be non-judgmental, just be aware, be patient, and accept people for who they are. And then, but like my hunger to learn more, like you said, the gap between English and Arabic was always there. One of the first things I read was an English translation of the Quran, right? Because I wanted to understand what this book says, but I always knew that there was something still missing. I wanted to touch the Quran directly, and the only way I would be able to do that was through Arabic. And of course, I had like a sound Arabic base, right? But then I wanted to go deeper, and that's why when I came back, you know, I had a job and everything, right? But part-time, I decided to sign up for a Sharia degree. I looked around, and there was this part-time program, 4 years, pure in Arabic, with like the top teachers, the religious teachers in Bahrain. And so it was a great opportunity to learn all aspects of religion from that aspect. And so that's where I come back, and you know, I'm continuing my learning, but now going deep into religion.
Nice. You mentioned like you come from a religious family, and then you come in conservative, I would say, maybe. But when you came back with that mindset, just talk to me through. Like I've seen a lot of transformations from people from one extreme to another, and how like they, even if their family members were trying to get them to pray, get them to do the normal rituals of Islam. They weren't doing it before. Right now, when they transform, they come in and the family cannot just digest that. Just talk to me about that a little bit.
Right. So, it's actually tricky to define how religious we were, right? Because again, you have degrees of practicing, right? But I wouldn't label my family as religious.
Okay.
Like we would pray. Like I don't even remember if I was praying 5 times a day, but it was Fajr was always there. I think Isha was there. So like one example is we never went for Umrah. Like my entire life, never thought of even going there or Hajj or anything. And we used to fast just because it's, the born Muslim kind of attitude. Okay, you pray because you gotta pray, you fast, whatever. But that's it. I mean.
Okay.
So we weren't ultra religious or anything. It was very simple religion. My parents gave me a lot of freedom, which I think was extremely important.
Yeah.
The freedom to explore the world and to make mistakes.
To find you.
To find me. I think that was necessary. The more that they hold on to me, I don't think I would have had that opportunity. So I think, letting me explore and whatever. And so coming back was a very big challenge because they weren't that religious, right? And here I am with this transformation, and they can see it a bit with my facial hair and stuff, right? But and my father, there was a disconnect between me and him. I remember, he was disturbed. He was worried because he was a liberal, right? And he thought that my son's gonna go study abroad, come back, and make money, and so that was all his expectations, where he didn't have any idea about the religion's part. And of course the worry, and I don't blame them, they were worried about me getting brainwashed, which is completely possible, right? Because how do you know a person's way of thinking? It's very difficult, right? You can't just go into his heart or his mind and understand.
I always say, no one, I don't know what's going on in your head.
Exactly.
This is something that people always tend to think that you need to understand me. But I say, no one is living in your head.
Exactly.
So communication is the key.
Yes.
But you're in 2 different levels right now.
Exactly. Yeah. So that bridge was very challenging, and I think that advice of not speaking too much wasn't helping actually from their aspect, because they want to know what's up with me, and I wasn't talking much. And so this fear of the unknown, fear of the silent, that khafila min as-sakit, that kind of thing. So it wasn't like I was hiding something, it was actually for their benefit, so. But my teacher also gave me advice. He said, "You be the best son you can be to your parents. Be the best brother you can be. Be the best employee you can be. Be honest. Be trustworthy. So let your practice preach, right? Let your talk, I say, walk the talk, right? And so I would consume a lot, study a lot, but then speak very little, but I was inspired by a lot of these preachers and stuff, and one of the preachers back then was Amr Khalid. I don't know if you know Amr Khalid, the Egyptian preacher, right? So he would preach to the youth of that time, and he was one of the pioneers of self-development and Islam, right?
Nice.
I was really inspired by him. I remember every Ramadan he'd have a show where he'd talk about different themes: the life of the Prophet, the life of the Sahaba, the companions. The 4 Imams, and really interesting stuff. I would look forward to that every Ramadan. I'd be hooked to it. The names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, all these different themes. Yeah. And I found out one day that this guy, one of his because I loved his preaching skills, right? He has a funny sound, a funny voice, right? But very charismatic. He really engages. And I learned that this guy was a master in NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. And so I was like, what in the world is this, right? And so I find out that there's this local guy who's teaching this stuff. So I sign up. And this is back in 2003. And I go there and wow, I learn about the mind and the subconscious mind and limiting beliefs and the power of the mind and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. And this is self-development on top of like Quran and like spirituality, I was like, wow, this is really good stuff. And I want to gain that confidence and that strength to overcome my limiting beliefs, to like speak up whenever the time is right, because I was shut up for that time, right? But this was a time to also sign up for NLP courses and self-development courses. That was the beginning of my self-development journey.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Allah, that's amazing, man.
Yeah.
And I love how like you kind of take us like step-by-step process where you show everyone goes through phases, you know, like, and every one of us, you know, need to embrace every phase we're going to, because it's just like a foundation that you keep on building up.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people that keep on shaming where they come from, not knowing is that was one of the main pillars of the foundation that makes you who you are today.
Yes.
So you go to these to this self-development phase right now. Where did that lead you to?
Yeah, so self-development was another whole world, right? And, you know, my attitude was, out of all the things I studied in religion classes, Quran was always the most compelling, right? And so think of that as, after graduating from religious studies, Quran was the rope that I kept holding on to. And I would explore self-development, read books even from the, you know, writers of the West and stuff, because there's not much written from this part of the world in that field. But this then made me realize that, wow, I have this talent and ability to listen to people.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I remember back in school, even like I would be the one who had the secrets of like most of the guys, right? And they would come and open up to me about their problems, and I would be the ear that would listen to them. So I had this, for some reason, people open up to me, right? Like, we sit for 5 minutes, they would tell me like everything that's inside would come out, right? So this was a God-given talent, I think. And I wanted to polish that even further. And so I explored life coaching as a certification. Alhamdulillah, I got ICF certified for that. But at the same time, I also thought that community development is important, right? I wanted to bring that experience I had in New York, of that brotherhood and sisterhood and the Siraj Wahaj kind of talks. I want to bring that to Bahrain, but there was no speaker here, right? So one example of that would be to invite those speakers here, right? So I set up an organization called Falaq, got together a group of volunteers. So we would invite these speakers to come from abroad, and we'd hold events with 500,000 people coming up. It was a social entrepreneurship project, right? So we charged, but just to break even and that kind of stuff. And, you know, our sponsors would help and that kind of stuff. But then on top of that, like inviting speakers, we couldn't do many events, right? I mean, it's not practical. So that's where the volunteers, like, they asked me to kind of step up and to be that role model for the youth in Bahrain who would speak in that, you know, manner and be a local resource, right? And so that's, I think, thanks to my volunteers who pushed me to do that, was when I came on the platform of preaching, right, and teaching. And so, with my coaching degree, with my with my Quranic kind of love, we would hold events. And we, you know, one of my favorite events was Quran for Family. We would do this every quarter, where like 600-800 people would come together, and I would teach an entire surah from like start to finish, right? So we did like Surah Al-Rahman, we did Surah Al-Hujurat, Surah Nuh, and like all of these different surahs. Because I found the Quran like a treasure, and I wanted to, like, people pay 2-3 dinars to go and watch a movie for 2.5 hours. I wanted to do the same, like pay 2-3 dinars, but come and learn about Surah Nuh. Come and learn about Surah Al-Hujurat. And, you know, Allah has blessed me with like these graphic design abilities, so with presentations. And I don't know if you've heard of Zoom. Yeah. So you zoom in and out, and so I would use those skills to kind of create visual presentations, and to try to kind of show the entire structure of the surah and how it comes together, and how each segment is a different theme, and how they all like blend together and make like this. It's like a beautiful pearl necklace where every ayah is connected to the one after it. Because, you know, sometimes you read the Quran and it feels like it's jumbled, right? It's like spaghetti, right? Like,
it's kind of related, but the Quran is like it's a story, but at the end of the day, they're not put in the like a proper sequence.
Exactly. So like actually they are put in the perfect sequence,
is,
but
yeah.
we're not able to see that, right?
Sure,
And so that
sure.
was a challenge for me as a teacher: is how do I show this in 2 to 3 hours, right? Because you need a long time, right? And
Yeah,
of
yeah,
course,
yeah.
you can't do justice to a surah in 2 3 hours, right? We can never do justice to understanding the Quran because it's an ocean, and our understanding is a drop in that ocean. But just to give them a taste of, and to make them appreciate the Quran more, right? And this is something that the community would come together. Mothers, fathers, couples, children would come. We would make the children sit in the front. We'd have a babysitting corner so that mothers would also come. So it was like this weekend hangout. We'd have snacks and stuff. And I just loved like researching and teaching. And I, did a lot of voluntary work with a Saturday school here. Like in America, they call it Sunday school, where like parents would send their kids to learn about Islam.
Nice.
From like nice and open-minded teachers, right? So we had a similar concept here called WISE, Weekend Islamic Studies Education, where volunteers would come together and parents would send their kids there, and we would teach them the moderate Islam, the balanced Islam kind of attitude, where Islam wants you to become a force for good on earth, right? To clarify misconceptions,
Yeah.
to give our children and the youth a sense of purpose in life, and to because with all due respect to the education, like you have Islamic studies as part of education, but it's just one class a week, right? So we wanted to fill that void, and so all of these efforts were just coming together, and it was a beautiful kind of journey of like serving the community, and serving people who wanted even private help, right? And that's where the coaching would come in, because you can give a talk for 3 hours, but then there's
Some
800 people and all of them have issues,
yeah,
right?
They
And
want in-depth work.
exactly, and so that's where my coaching skills would come in.
That's beautiful. Man.
Yeah.
You talked about excellency and never giving up as your values back then. What are your values today?
Right. So what's interesting about values is in my coaching practice, I actually use an exercise called core values discovery.
Nice.
It's a 3 to 4 hour process where basically the theory behind it is that all core values go back to Allah's beautiful names. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, God, has infinite attributes, right? But we have been given some of them.
Yes.
According to some scholars, it's 99 names. The Quran mentions some of them also. So for example, there is Al-Mubin, one of Allah's names, the clarifier, right? Now this is the name of Allah, but it can also be a core value that's inside of me. So Al-Mubin, to answer your question, is one of my core values. And that's what sparks in me that natural kind of hunger and passion to continue reading and studying, to seek clarity in life. And so that's one side of the coin, is to seek clarity from Allah, being the source. But then the other side of the coin is to
Reflect it.
contribute it and give this clarity to others. Now that you've gotten it, now let it flow out of you in a natural way. So it's very humbling, I think, when we put it this way, because number one, I'm not giving you clarity from myself. I'm actually empty. And in fact, the way it works is the more empty your cup is, the more Allah will give you, right? So core value number one, definitely Al-Mubin. And then the second one would be Allah's name Al-Wasi', which means open-minded. It means expansion. It means abundance also. And from Al-Wasi' comes also this idea of just being open, I think, like being open-minded, right? I wanted to bring that side of Islam. If it's Allah's name, people need to know that Allah is expansive. He's not limited. He's not closing your life. Islam isn't supposed to make you limited. It's not supposed to squeeze you and to put you into a prison, right?
Box, kind of,
it's completely the opposite, right? So these two are the big ones, I would say, right? Clarity and open-mindedness. And that's why, like, even in my talks, I would make sure that I'm wearing jeans and, like, casual and putting on wax and gel and stuff, because I want the youth to feel that, listen, you can still be spiritual and religious and like look cool, right? You don't have to dress in a certain way. You don't have to
Yeah.
change your appearance or anything, right? Because spirituality is an inner
Yes,
thing,
yeah,
right?
yeah, thank you.
Um, so, so yeah, I mean, core values. One of the problem with the way people, number one, people don't understand what core values is. Extremely important, right? Number two, the methodologies out there for discovering your core values, I believe, are flawed, because they take you through a series of exercises where you answer a few questions. What makes you happy? What makes you sad? What are the peak moments in your life? What are the troughs in your life? And there's a lot of books written about this, right? But then you come down to these 5 values, and then they ask you, okay, give yourself a rating out of 5, for example, for each of these values. And you would give yourself, let's say, for you, courage is a value, but you're at a 2 out of 5. Let's say one of the values for you is love, but you're like 1 out of 5, right? And so you have these gaps. And then what do they tell you? They tell you, okay, good luck. These are your core values. Now, good luck in bringing all of those 5 core values up to a level of 5 out of 5, right? Mm-hmm. Which I think is problematic, and I think it's flawed. So, in alhamdulillah, the techniques I've been teaching is that those core values that you've come to, those are just signposts. Now what we need to do is what I call unmasking. And that takes 3 to 4 hours. For every single value, we unmask it to reveal the true hidden core value, right? It's like a pearl that's hidden in a shell deep down under the water. And once that's revealed, then it's just like being reborn again, right? And of course, like I said, we connect those core values to the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So for example, stillness or peace for some people is a core value. It is for me, actually. It's one of my 5. Linked to Allah's name, Al-Salam, right? Another core value of mine is compassion and connectivity, which is Ar-Rahim, right? And so, so I think to answer your questions, those are my core values. And I think core values is a topic that's extremely important because it's all about discovering your core values. For me, at least, it's connecting them to Allah and then using them to contribute and to give and to be an instrument of positive change in society using the core values that Allah has gifted you. And of course, these can evolve and change and grow over time.
Beautiful, man. The only reason why I said that, because we heard your story. We heard the transformations that you went through. And I believe core values is kind of the fundamentals of who you are today and how you reflect it to the self. Who is Fahad today?
So, Fahad is a seeker, a student, a helper, and ambitious, I would say,
Nice.
ambition. That's why I'm today, I think. It's an ongoing journey of self-discovery and just because enlightenment isn't something that you achieve, right? It's a process, and my thirst for just seeking more and growing is never ending. And we try to contribute whatever we can in the limited time we have to, and not necessarily to leave a big legacy, because I think that for some people is problematic. You don't actually need to leave a big legacy. This idea of living an extraordinary life, I think that's overrated.
True.
Right? You are extraordinary already.
True.
Right? You are amazing already. Right? So sometimes the simple things we do are extraordinary. So even this, because sometimes like when you push those ideas that you need to achieve, you need to,
those expectations.
Yeah, and then for a lot of people that can be a cause of misery and depression, because they feel like, I'm not worth it, or I'm not good enough, or I'm ordinary.
I haven't achieved much and all that. True.
Exactly, yeah.
So, based on who you are today, what's your message for the younger Fahad?
I guess being grateful. A big message of that is being grateful for the fact that, for, of course, number one, grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for blessing me with a wonderful experience so far, right? Given the ups and downs in life, right? That's part of the
Journey.
the whole adventure, I would say, yeah. Number two, being blessed with wonderful parents who allowed me to be who I am today. I think that allowance was just unbelievable, right? And it's something that I want to also give back to my children, hopefully with my wife.
I'm sure it does, looking at you proud. And
Yeah. And then, just being grateful for the friends, the connections we've made throughout this wonderful journey. And we ask Allah to kind of use us to help anyone out there who would need support. We're here to support human beings who are created for interdependence, and I think it's wonderful whatever we can do together and collaborate to help one another in good times and bad times. It's just being grateful every moment. Yeah, definitely.
Man, I really enjoyed this talk, man, and thank you for all this. Where could people find more about you?
Right, so if you want to listen to some of the things I talk about, we do like a Quran kind of reflection session every Sunday. That's uploaded on our podcast, which is available on the Apple podcast, Falaq TV, FALAQ TV. It's also available for Android users, and then they're also uploaded on YouTube. Otherwise, I can be reached at Fahad at falaq.tv, FAHAD at FALAQ.tv. Right.
Man, thank you so much. I can't stress how much I enjoy this. I see a lot of myself within that story, and I learned so much about it, that I would cherish myself, man. So thank you so much for that, and thank you for everyone watching us. This is the second chapter of Gentlemen, bringing the gentle back in men, with my guest Fahad Sarwani. Thank you for being with us, and thank you for your bringing out your authentic self. And I hope people will learn at least the wisdom behind all this. And if you want, you could reach him out, as he said, in his channels. And thank you for bringing the gentle back in men.
Thank you, Hamad. Pleasure.
Thank you.